On a frozen Christmas night, a battle-worn Marine and his loyal dog stumbled upon a little girl shivering alone beneath the city lights. She whispered that God sent them, just as her mother lay dying in a hospital bed across town.
She said you were the bravest.
What began as a simple rescue unraveled into a final wish, a mother's last plea for someone to save her child from a future of loneliness. The Marine had faced war, loss, and darkness, but nothing prepared him for the weight of this tiny hand clinging to his. And as the mother's heartbeat faded, his promise to her became a mission no battlefield ever taught him to survive. A mission where courage meant love, sacrifice meant family, and a loyal German shepherd sensed every step before it happened. This is the story of the Christmas night when 3 lives collided, and how a veteran, a child, and a dog became a miracle to one another. Ironwood had always been the kind of northern town that tried to outshine its winters. Every December, as the days shortened and the air turned razor sharp, the city responded not with gloom, but with brilliance. Strings of golden lights hung across Main Street, wreaths on every lamppost, wreaths on every door, and a towering Christmas tree in the heart of the square, its ornaments glittering like captured stars. Families moved beneath that glow with the soft hurry of holiday joy. Fathers carried shopping bags stuffed with toys, mothers chatted as they tugged their children's mittens straight, and couples wandered side by side, cheeks flushed with the bite of winter. The smell of cinnamon and baked apples drifted from the bakery on the corner, mixing pleasantly with the crisp scent of pine boughs sold by local scouts. Ironwood looked almost like the inside of a snow globe, self-contained, sparkling, peaceful. But just 3 blocks away, under the flicker of a dying street lamp and the thin metal roof of an old bus stop, the world was different. Emma Clark sat alone on the frozen bench, hugging an empty shoebox to her chest as if it were something precious. She was 6 years old, though small for her age. Thin wrists, narrow shoulders, and the kind of slightness that spoke of skipped meals rather than natural delicacy. Her coat, once a soft mint color, was faded now, its lining too thin to keep out the cold. The sleeves hung a little long, frayed at the ends. Her leggings, a pale lavender, were dotted with tiny holes at the knees. Her shoes were canvas, meant for autumn at best, and the snow had already soaked through them, reddening her toes beneath the fabric. Her cheeks were flushed painfully pink, her breath trembling in short wisps. Curly brown hair peeked from beneath her frayed hat, dusted with snowflakes that melted slowly against her cold skin. Emma had been sitting there for a little over 40 minutes, long enough for the cold to creep into her fingers, but not so long that she was in real danger. She wasn't outside because she had nowhere to go. She was outside because she was afraid. Not afraid of the cold, not afraid of the dark. She was afraid of being the only one awake in her apartment while her mother struggled to breathe in the next room. Emma had slipped outside after her mother's breathing turned shallow, after the weak, frightening sound made her heart jump into her throat. She had wanted to run for help, but the hallway was dark, and the neighboring apartments echoed with laughter and music. Through cracks in the doors, she saw families gathered around televisions, clinking glasses, opening early presents. It was Christmas Eve, and Emma was afraid to spoil someone's happiness with her own fear. So she had walked outside, intending to gather the courage to knock, to ask someone, anyone, to help. Con joy ho an song, roi moi gon qua, con kong muon lam fien ai trong le gyang sin. A simple sentence, but the kind that could break something inside a person. She wasn't crying. Children like Emma rarely cried, not loudly anyway. Instead, she stared at the snow falling beyond the metal shelter, watching it swirl under the streetlight like lost starlight. Her small fingers pressed into the cardboard shoebox, using it to warm her hands the way other children used mittens. Emma didn't have mittens anymore. They had been left on the heater one morning to dry after getting soaked in the snow, but the heater never turned on again. She thought of her mother, pale under their threadbare blanket, whispering weak reassurances. She thought of returning home and finding the room even darker than before. She thought of knocking on doors and wishing she didn't have to. She thought quietly about hope, how it felt like something that only lived inside storybooks. At that same moment, Logan Barrett was walking Ranger down the street toward the parking lot where he had left his truck earlier in the day. Logan, 35, tall and broad-shouldered, wore his Marine Corps' Marpat uniform beneath a heavy jacket. His boots left deep prints in the snow. His face, rugged and weathered from years of deployments, was marked by a short, uneven beard and faint silver at the edges of his dark hair. His eyes, blue-gray, steady, watchful, had seen too much to be easily surprised. And yet they softened whenever they fell on the one companion who had stayed by his side through every nightmare he couldn't talk about. Ranger, his 4-year-old German shepherd, moved like a soldier himself, calm, disciplined, keen. His sable coat gleamed under the street lights, the bright triangle of fur on his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. His harness, black and fitted snugly to his frame, bore a single patch with his name. Ranger's ears twitched left and right, catching each sound, each footstep, each shift in the wind. Logan had returned home to Ironwood on leave, hoping to spend Christmas with his parents before his next posting. He had imagined warmth, family, a quiet dinner perhaps. But even as he walked through the decorated streets, he felt strangely displaced, caught between the life he'd lived and the life he'd never quite had time to build. Ranger suddenly stopped. Logan tugged the leash gently, but the dog didn't budge. Ranger's ears locked forward, his golden brown eyes fixed on something across the street. "What is it, buddy?" Logan murmured. Ranger's tail went still, his body lowered slightly, not in aggression, but in alertness, the sort of alertness he had shown only in combat zones. Logan followed the dog's line of sight and saw a small figure curled beneath the bus shelter. A child, alone. Something cold, not the winter air, slid across Logan's spine. Without a word, Ranger pulled again, this time toward the shelter. Logan allowed it. As they approached, the girl looked up. Her eyes were large, dark, and tired in a way no child should ever be. She hugged the shoebox closer as Ranger came near. But when he stopped in front of her, the dog slowly lowered his head, pressing his warm muzzle against her knee. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A tiny breath, but full of relief. "What are you doing out here, sweetheart?" Logan asked, kneeling beside her. His voice softened automatically, something rare for him, reserved for the most vulnerable. Ranger leaned closer, gently nudging Emma's hand until her fingers loosened from the shoebox long enough to feel his fur. Emma whispered, I just needed to wait. I didn't want to bother anyone." "Are you cold?" Logan asked. She nodded timidly. Without hesitation, Logan shrugged off his own jacket, the thick Marine-issued one beneath his coat, and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her small frame completely. Beneath it, Emma could feel the warmth left behind by Logan's body. It was the first real warmth she'd felt all night. "You're not bothering me," he said softly. Emma looked at him, unsure whether to believe it. Ranger lifted his paw and set it gently on Logan's thigh, his signal, the one he used in the field when he sensed danger or distress. Logan recognized it instantly. He wasn't sure which figure, Emma or Ranger, his heart bent toward more in that moment. Just then, Ranger stiffened. His ears snapped up. His head jerked toward the direction Emma had come from, toward the street of apartment buildings, still partly shrouded in shadow. A low, rumbling whine escaped his throat, soft but urgent, the kind he used only when something was deeply wrong. Emma's small hand tightened on Logan's sleeve. "Please, can you come with me?" she whispered, voice breaking for the first time. "My mom, she's not waking up." The Christmas lights of Ironwood continued to shimmer on, bright and oblivious, while one corner of the town sank into dread. And Logan realized this wasn't chance. Ranger hadn't brought him here by accident. Logan lifted Emma into his arms. It wasn't a choice. It was instinct. Ranger walked close to his side, unusually protective, as if guarding something fragile and irreplaceable. As they moved through the snow toward the rundown apartment block Emma indicated, Logan's mind raced through possibilities. A fainting spell, a panic attack, hypothermia, malnourishment. He didn't know the details yet, but he knew the signs of someone in trouble. He had seen it too many times in too many places. The building loomed ahead, cracked bricks, dim hallways, a stark contrast to the bright streets they had left behind. The festive music faded as Logan stepped inside, replaced by a cold silence broken only by the hum of an old fluorescent light. Ranger's nails clicked softly on the floor as he guided them down the hallway, nose lifted, searching, verifying. Logan could almost feel the dog's heartbeat quickening, synced with Emma's trembling breaths against his chest. At the door marked 3E, Emma pointed with a shaky finger. Inside, a faint sound, like shallow, uneven breathing, reached Logan's ears. "Mom?" Emma whispered. Logan pushed the door open. The room was dark except for a weak bulb flickering near the kitchen sink. A young woman lay curled under thin blankets on a sagging bed, her chest rising and falling with painful difficulty. She was small, pale, and far too still. Grace Clark, 29. Thin, honey-brown hair tied loosely. A face that might have once been bright, but was now worn by exhaustion and illness. Logan felt something tighten in his throat, a quiet, heavy ache. He set Emma down gently. The girl rushed to her mother's side, placing her tiny hands against Grace's cheek. "Mommy, I brought help." Grace's eyelids fluttered open at the sound of Emma's voice. Her gaze found Logan, tall, steady, silhouetted in the doorway, like someone sent by fate rather than chance. And for a brief moment, she managed a grateful, broken smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Ranger stepped closer, pressing his warm head against the side of the bed, an instinctive gesture of reassurance. Logan reached for his phone. This night would not end like all the others Emma had endured. Not if he could help it. For now, that was all that mattered. Logan stepped into the apartment with a caution that came not from fear, but from a trained instinct. A quiet, practiced awareness that had been carved into him by years of deployments, night watches, and moments where a single detail could mean everything. He let the door close slowly behind him so as not to startle Grace. Ranger moved ahead by a few steps, tail lowered, posture soft yet alert, his nose lifting as he took in the stale air of the room. The apartment was colder than the winter outside. Not the sharp sting of the wind, but the deeper kind of cold that settled into the bones, cold made not by weather, but by poverty, neglect, and broken utilities that no one bothered to fix in the poorer end of Ironwood. The single weak bulb above the sink flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow against peeling wallpaper. A cramped table stood in the corner, bearing only a half-empty box of crackers and a chipped mug. A tiny heater sat unplugged near the window, its cord frayed, its metal casing rusted. Taped over the cracked window pane were strips of plastic wrap that rattled faintly with every draft. The room was a quiet portrait of survival, but fading, like something barely clinging to the edges of winter. Grace Clark lay on the sagging bed against the back wall. She was 29, but the illness had carved years into her features. Her frame was thin, far too thin, her collarbones like fragile wings beneath her worn beige sweater. Honey-brown hair, pulled into a loose, low knot, fell over one shoulder in stray, exhausted strands. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the dim light. Yet her eyes, warm brown, gentle even in weakness, still carried the soft resilience of a mother who had learned to endure more than she ever spoke aloud. When she saw Emma, she attempted a smile, one that wavered but still held love. "Baby," she whispered, reaching weakly toward her daughter. Emma rushed to her side, gripping her mother's hand tightly. Grace's breathing was shallow, and the rise and fall of her chest came with a subtle tremor that made Logan's stomach tighten. "Ma'am," he said softly, stepping forward. "I'm Logan Barrett. Your daughter found me outside." She was worried. Grace looked at him, really looked, and for a second her eyes widened with faint recognition, though Logan couldn't imagine from where. Her voice was almost too soft to catch. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry she troubled you. She should never have gone outside in this cold, but She paused, drawing in a shaky breath. "I couldn't get up." Logan crouched beside the bed, his tall frame folding in close. He spoke gently, the way he used to speak to younger Marines who were afraid to admit something was wrong. "She didn't trouble me. She did what she was supposed to. She got help. That's brave." Emma lowered her head shyly, but her eyes shone with something like relief. Ranger stepped closer to the bed, lowering his head until his muzzle gently touched Grace's hand. Grace let out a soft gasp, more emotional than physical, and brushed his fur with trembling fingers. "What a beautiful dog," she whispered. "He has kind eyes." "He's a good boy," Logan said, glancing at Ranger with a faint, quiet pride. 4 years old, served with me overseas." Ranger's ear flicked at the sound of his name. Then he settled at the bedside, like a silent guardian. Grace's gaze lingered on Ranger for a long time, something softening in her expression. "He reminds me of the dogs my father used to raise. Long ago." A tiny smile touched her lips, then vanished as pain tightened her features. "I'm sorry," she murmured again. "Tonight wasn't supposed to be like this." "It's okay," Logan said. "We're here now." He stood and examined the room with a soldier's practiced eye. There was no food except crackers, no running heater, no medication bottles except for one almost empty prescription container on the floor. He picked it up, heart medication. The label was dated weeks ago. Grace saw his expression and spoke, embarrassed. I missed the last refill, and Emma's been needing warmer clothes. I couldn't." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Ranger suddenly lifted himself from the floor, ears pricking sharply, eyes locked on the dark hallway beyond the half-open door. A low rumble traveled through his chest, felt more than heard. Not aggressive, but warning, instinctive, urgent. Logan froze. Ranger only behaved like that when he sensed distress, not danger. Distress. Emma clutched her shoebox tighter. Grace's breathing hitched, and for a split second, Logan felt something shift in the room, a silent signal, a hum beneath the air, like the apartment itself was calling out for someone to finally intervene. As quickly as it came, the tension broke. Ranger lowered his head again, pressing against Emma's shoulder as though urging her to stay close. The message was clear. Something here needed protecting, and Logan was beginning to understand who. Grace's voice pulled him back. "Mr. Barrett, I don't want Emma to be alone. Not tonight. Not if something happens." Logan sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "We're going to get you help, and she won't be alone. I promise." Grace closed her eyes, breathing shallow. "There's no heat here. The landlord, well," she hesitated. "He doesn't come by anymore. Not since the pipes burst last month." That made sense. More sense than Logan wanted it to. Buildings like this were common across towns like Ironwood. Places where forgotten families lived below the glow of Christmas lights, hoping nobody asked why their windows stayed dark. Suddenly, a knock sounded on the apartment door. Soft, hesitant, unsure. Emma startled. Ranger's head jerked up again, but this time he didn't rumble. Instead, his tail gave a single, cautious wag, as if he recognized something familiar. Logan moved to the door and opened it a crack. A thin, elderly woman stood in the hall, wrapped in two mismatched scarves. Her face was wrinkled and kind, with tired blue eyes and white hair tucked under a knitted hat. She clutched a grocery bag to her chest, a bag holding canned soup and a loaf of bread. "You must be the man Emma found," she said, her voice quiet but warm. "I'm Mrs. Halpern. I live across the hall." Her movements were slow, stiff with age, and her breath puffed faintly in the cold hallway. "I heard the little one running earlier. Thought I'd check in." Logan introduced himself. Mrs. Halpern smiled gently at him, and when she leaned down to glance into the room, her face softened at the sight of Emma. "I tried to bring them food," she whispered, "but I can't do much. My pension—" She trailed off with an apologetic shrug. Logan thanked her sincerely and assured her Grace would be getting help soon. Mrs. Halpern nodded gratefully and shuffled back toward her door, leaving Logan with a renewed heaviness in his chest. This wasn't just a struggling household. It was a forgotten corner of the town, overlooked even by those who lived just streets away. Back in the room, Grace was growing paler. Logan felt the urgency rising. He moved closer to her. "Grace, I need to get an ambulance here. You need proper care." She hesitated, fear flickering briefly in her eyes. "They'll ask about Emma, and if they see how we've been living—" "Emma will stay with me," he said firmly. "Until you're well enough. They won't take her anywhere." He met Emma's gaze. "I won't let that happen." Emma nodded, trusting him completely. Grace's lips trembled with relief. Her eyes filled with tears she seemed too tired to shed. "Thank you," she breathed. "You don't know what this means." Logan reached for his phone, dialing emergency services with one hand while the other rested atop Ranger's head. Ranger stayed pressed close to Emma, his warm body against her knees, grounding her. As Logan confirmed the address with the dispatcher, he heard Grace whisper softly, "I didn't think anyone would come." He swallowed hard. "We're here now." Minutes passed slowly. Ranger occasionally lifted his head, ears turning at distant sirens. Emma held her mother's hand, murmuring soft words. Mostly promises that she would be okay, that help was coming, that she wouldn't leave her alone. Grace stroked her daughter's hair with weak fingers. When the sirens grew closer, Logan stepped outside the room to meet the paramedics. 2 EMTs arrived. A tall man with close-cropped black hair and steady hands, and a woman with sharp features softened by calm professionalism. They moved quickly once they stepped into 3E, their assessment efficient but gentle. "She's stable enough to transport," the woman said. "But she needs immediate treatment." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Can I go too?" Logan squeezed her shoulder. "I'll take you. Ranger will come with us." The paramedics lifted Grace carefully onto the stretcher. Her fingers scrambled weakly until they found Emma's small hand. "I'll be right there, Mommy," Emma whispered. Ranger stayed by Emma's side the entire time, leaning into her as though shielding her from the world outside. Logan noted how natural it looked, how the dog seemed to understand exactly what was happening. As they headed for the ambulance, snow began falling again. Softer this time, drifting lazily from the night sky. The glow from the city center spilled faintly across the street, casting warm reflections on wet pavement. Ironwood's lights shone brightly, as if unaware of the quiet struggle unfolding just beyond their reach. And Logan, following the stretcher into the cold night with Emma pressed against his side, understood one thing with absolute clarity. He hadn't just stumbled into this moment. He had been led to it, by fate, by circumstance, or maybe by the silent instinct of a dog who still believed in saving people. Whatever the reason, he wasn't walking away. Not now, not ever. The ambulance cut through the winter streets with a muted wail, its lights reflecting in the icy windows of Ironwood's downtown shops. Logan followed closely behind in his truck, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting on Ranger's neck as the German shepherd sat upright, alert, watching the ambulance ahead as though it carried the fate of his entire world. Snow fell in slow, patient flakes, softening the harsh edges of the night. Emma sat beside Logan, wrapped in his marine jacket, her small hands clinging to the fabric as if afraid it might vanish. Her breathing was quiet, but her eyes were wide, too wide for a child her age. When they reached Ironwood General, Logan carried her through the sliding doors. The hospital lobby was clean, bright, and decorated with a modest Christmas tree near the reception desk. Yet the warmth of the room didn't touch Emma. She only glanced once at the lights before burying her face into Logan's shoulder. Ranger walked at his side, his tail low, his eyes scanning every nurse, visitor, and hallway with an especially protective intensity. A nurse approached. Middle-aged, short, with warm brown skin and glasses perched low on her nose. She wore blue scrubs decorated with tiny snowmen and a badge that read, "Nurse Angela." Her voice was steady but gentle. "ER bed 5 for the mother. We'll get her stabilized first." She eyed Logan's marine uniform, then Ranger's tactical harness. "Your dog is well trained." "Best partner I've ever had," Logan replied quietly. Nurse Angela smiled briefly before turning to guide the paramedics through double doors toward the emergency wing. Logan set Emma down carefully, kneeling so they were eye level. "Emma, we're going to wait right here, okay? They're helping your mom." Emma nodded. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She pressed her forehead against Ranger's cheek instead. The dog nudged her gently, letting out a soft chuff, one he used only with people who were frightened. Logan had seen Ranger comfort Marines after explosions, after loss, after nights when sleep brought more terror than safety. But he had never seen Ranger soften as much as he did for Emma. A social worker approached from the front desk. A woman in her early 40s, tall and slim, with auburn hair tied neatly in a bun and a long maroon coat draped over her arm. Her skin was pale from the cold, her hazel eyes observant but not unkind. She extended a hand to Logan. "Sarah Donovan, Social Services. They paged me as soon as the ambulance reported a minor with an unstable guardian." Her tone was professional, but not cold. Years of handling fragile situations had shaped her voice into something firm yet compassionate. Logan introduced himself. Sarah crouched to Emma's height, smoothing her coat beneath her as she knelt. "Sweetheart, I just want to make sure you're safe tonight. I know this is scary." She did not touch Emma. She waited, letting the child decide. Emma simply nodded and stepped half a step closer to Ranger, who placed himself protectively in front of her. Sarah raised an eyebrow, impressed. "He's something special." Logan nodded. "He knows when someone needs comfort." The three sat in the waiting area. The lights above hummed, and the smell of antiseptic coated the air. Emma's eyelids fluttered as exhaustion pulled her downward, but every time her eyes began to close, they snapped open again, searching for reassurance. Logan set a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You can rest. I'm not going anywhere." Emma leaned into him, Ranger curling his body around her legs like a warm shield. Minutes stretched. The hospital clock ticked with a slow rhythm that made Logan's chest ache. He remembered nights in Afghanistan, sitting in field tents, listening to soldiers whisper about their families, their worries, their ghosts. He'd never imagined he would be the one holding a child in a hospital waiting room years later. Suddenly, Ranger lifted his head sharply, ears pricked, body going still. Emma startled awake. Sarah paused mid-sentence. Logan felt the familiar tension run through the dog's muscles, an instinctive alertness that had saved lives in combat. But instead of growling or bracing for threat, Ranger walked toward the hallway where Grace had been taken, stopping directly before a closed ER door. He pressed his forehead against it, eyes softening, ears drooping in an unmistakable gesture of sorrow. Then he let out a low, mournful whine. Not danger, not fear, something else. It was as if Ranger sensed the fragile thread holding Grace to consciousness, fragile enough that a dog trained to feel human distress understood its weight. Emma clutched Logan's arm. "Is Mommy?" she whispered. Logan tightened his hold on her, voice steady but thick. "They're helping her. Ranger's just worried." But inside he felt the truth settle like snow on warm ground. Quiet, inevitable, heartbreaking. A doctor emerged moments later. Dr. Mitchell Hayes was in his 50s, tall and slightly round-shouldered from long hours spent bending over charts. His salt-gray hair fell over his forehead despite regular attempts to brush it back. His expression was kind, but tired. The kind that came from delivering too many updates like the one he carried now. He greeted the group softly. "Emma, I'm Dr. Hayes. I'm helping your mom." Emma stepped forward cautiously. "Is she okay?" The doctor crouched, resting one knee on the tile floor so he could meet Emma eye to eye. His voice was warm, heavy with sympathy. "Your mom is very sick, sweetheart. Her heart is weak and she hasn't had the medicine she needs. We're giving her everything we can." "Is she going to wake up?" Emma whispered. Dr. Hayes hesitated, only a breath, but Logan saw it. The truth hovered behind the doctor's eyes. He had seen patients like Grace too many times. Silent tragedies that crept up quietly in forgotten corners of towns like Ironwood. "We're trying to stabilize her," he finally said, "but she needs to stay here for treatment." Sarah gently placed a hand near Emma's arm, not touching, just offering presence. "Emma, you'll need to stay somewhere tonight. It can be with someone you feel safe with. Do you have anyone?" Emma shook her head immediately. Her voice broke. I only have Mommy. Without thinking, Logan spoke. She can stay with me. Sarah turned to him, one eyebrow raised in assessment. You're active duty military? Marine Corps, Logan said. I'm on Christmas leave. My parents live 15 minutes from here. I'll stay with them tonight. There's space, safe space. Sarah studied him, not suspiciously, but professionally. Her gaze flicked from Logan to Emma, who had already pressed herself against his side as though the decision was made. She noted Ranger's posture, too. Calm, settled, protective. Then she exhaled softly. I'll need to file temporary guardianship paperwork, only for tonight. But she nodded slowly. It's clear she trusts you. Emma didn't wait for confirmation. She wrapped her arms around Ranger's neck and whispered into his fur. Can we go with him, please? Ranger licked her cheek once, a soft reassurance. Sarah saw enough. All right, she said gently. Let's get the forms. Logan lifted Emma into his arms. She rested her head against his shoulder, the tension in her small body gradually giving way to exhaustion. Ranger followed closely, stepping in sync with Logan, as though he refused to let any distance come between himself and Emma. Before leaving, Logan turned back to Dr. Hayes. Take care of her. Dr. Hayes nodded gravely. I will, and thank you. Not many would have stopped tonight. Logan looked at Emma's tiny fingers gripping his jacket. I couldn't have walked past her. The doctor watched them go, the snow outside glowing under hospital lights. Sometimes, he murmured to himself, the right person arrives at exactly the right moment. The winter wind followed them out of the ER waiting room and into the dark parking lot where Logan's truck sat idling. Snowflakes drifted lazily across the windshield, melting instantly against the warm glass. Logan adjusted the heater, turned the vents toward Emma, and opened the back door so Ranger could jump inside. The German shepherd leapt smoothly onto the back seat, curling his body so Emma could sit right beside him. Emma climbed up carefully, settling against Ranger's thick sable fur. She held on to him like he was an anchor in a world that suddenly felt too big and too frightening. Logan watched her through the open door, how her small fingers twisted into Ranger's coat, how her shoulders shook each time she exhaled. She was trying to be brave, trying not to cry, but the tremor in her breath betrayed her. You're doing good, kiddo, Logan murmured gently. We'll be right behind your mom. He closed the door softly, got into the driver's seat, and pulled onto the road. The ambulance ahead cut through the night with its muted lights, guiding the way like a desperate beacon in a snowstorm. Ranger rested his head on Emma's lap, occasionally lifting it to nudge her arm when she trembled too much. In the rearview mirror, Logan caught flashes of her eyes, wide, glistening, searching for comfort in a night that offered little of it. The streets thinned as they left downtown. Holiday decorations glowed from porches, fairy lights, inflatable Santas, wreaths, and candy canes. Families walked together, laughing, brushes of scarves, and the clatter of boots marking their path. The contrast was harsh. Joy outside, fear inside the truck. Emma whispered something so quietly, Logan almost missed it. I don't want her to be alone. You're with her, Logan replied, and she knows it. The ambulance turned sharply into the hospital driveway. Logan followed and parked, then rushed around to open the back door. Emma clung to Ranger and then allowed Logan to lift her out. Ranger stayed glued to her side, his tail low, his amber eyes following every movement of the paramedics unloading Grace from the ambulance. Inside the hospital, the world became a blur of bright lights, hurried footsteps, and clipped instructions. Grace was wheeled past them, the white sheets pulled high around her frail body, her breath shallow and uneven. Emma reached out instinctively, but Logan held her close, whispering, "They're helping her, Emma. She needs them right now." Emma swallowed hard. "Is she going to—" "We're here," Logan repeated softly. "We're staying." They were led to a small consultation room near the emergency ward. Quiet, dimly lit, smelling faintly of disinfectant and peppermint tea from the staff lounge next door. A nurse brought Emma a cup of warm water and a blanket. Ranger lay at her feet, his body stretched out protectively, his ears flicking every time someone passed outside the door. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Time felt like something suspended in ice. Emma began telling fragments of her story, halting whispers at first. She couldn't get up yesterday. She kept saying she was tired. She said the lights in her eyes were blurry. Logan listened, each word twisting deeper into him. "Her phone doesn't work now," Emma continued. "I wanted to ask the neighbors, but they were having a party. I didn't want to make them sad." Logan's chest tightened. "You weren't going to make anyone sad. You were trying to help." Emma didn't seem convinced. She pressed her face into Ranger's fur again. "I didn't want her to be alone if something bad happened." Ranger nudged her forehead with his snout, almost as if understanding. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "I didn't know what else to do." Suddenly, Ranger lifted his head sharply, ears poised like twin arrows. His entire body stiffened, but not in a defensive way. His attention snapped toward the hallway, to the direction where Grace had been taken. Then he got up. He walked to the door of the consultation room, sat down in front of it, and stared into the hallway with an expression Logan had seen only once. The night his best friend died in his arms overseas. Emma looked up, frightened. "Ranger, what's wrong?" Ranger turned his head slowly toward her, eyes soft, almost sorrowful, then pressed a paw to the bottom of the door. "Easy, buddy," Logan whispered, unease traveling through him. "Easy." But deep down, he recognized the look. Ranger sensed something shifting between hope and loss. Before Logan could dwell on it, the door opened. A social worker stepped inside, Sarah Donovan. She wore a long brown coat over a burgundy sweater, her red hair tied in a loose bun, snow melting into droplets on her shoulders. Her face held a composed sadness, the kind of expression carved from witnessing too many families in crisis. She looked tired but steady. "Emma," she said softly. "I'm Sarah. I'm here to help you and your mom tonight." Emma leaned closer to Logan. Sarah crouched down, tucking her coat beneath her knees. Her hazel eyes were warm despite the gravity in them. "Can I sit with you for a minute?" Emma didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. Sarah took that as permission. "I know this is scary," she began gently, "but you're not alone. We're going to make sure you're safe, okay?" Emma's chin trembled. "I want to be with Mommy." "And you will be," Sarah assured. "But while she's getting help, we need to make sure you have somewhere safe to rest." She glanced at Logan. "You said earlier she can stay with you?" "Yes," Logan said firmly. "She'll stay with me tonight." Sarah studied him, then nodded. "I'll start the temporary documentation after we hear from the doctor." Just then, Dr. Hayes entered. He looked older than he had earlier, his shoulders slightly slumped, his salt gray hair damp with sweat or melted snow. He closed the door gently. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "Is Mommy okay?" Dr. Hayes exhaled slowly. "Your mother is very ill. Her heart is struggling. We stabilized her for now, but she'll need ongoing treatment." Emma's face went pale. Is she going to die? The doctor knelt down to her height. We're doing everything we can. She's fighting hard, sweetheart. Emma burst into quiet tears. Ranger rested his head in her lap again, letting her sob into his fur. Dr. Hayes looked at Logan, and his expression said everything his words did not. Grace might not make it through the night. Logan swallowed hard. The Marine in him knew how to handle emergencies, how to respond to crises, but not this. Not a child folding in on herself as her world collapsed. He placed a hand gently on Emma's back. We're right here. An hour later, the paperwork was completed. Sarah walked them through the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights casting long reflections across the polished floors. Emma walked between Logan and Ranger, holding onto Ranger's harness strap with both hands. Outside, snow fell heavier, muffling the sounds of the city. Sarah helped them into the truck. Before closing the door, she said quietly to Logan, "She needs stability. She trusts you. Don't underestimate how important that is tonight." Logan nodded, his jaw tightening. "I'll keep her safe." "And Logan?" Sarah added gently, her breath visible in the freezing air. "If her mother doesn't improve, you may be the only person Emma has left." Logan felt that sentence strike deep. He closed the truck door with a heavy heart. Ranger settled beside Emma again as Logan drove away from the hospital. The little girl leaned into the dog, eyes half open, holding onto the only warmth she had left. Behind them, the hospital lights glowed dimly through falling snow, a silent reminder of the fragile line her mother now walked. Tonight would be long, and the fear of losing her mother settled around Emma like the cold itself. Grace woke just before dawn, as the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed quietly, and the world outside the windows still shimmered in the pale blue silence before sunrise. The monitors beside her bed blinked steadily, their rhythms fragile but present. Snowflakes clung to the glass, each one catching the faintest glimmer of the emergency room lights. The hospital was quiet at this hour, too quiet. Only the beeping machines and distant footsteps reminded Logan that life was still moving around them. Emma sat curled in a chair beside the bed, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her tiny hands clutching the sleeve of Logan's uniform. She had fallen asleep sometime around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally swallowing her fear. Ranger lay on the floor beside her, his thick sable fur rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. From time to time, he lifted his head to check on Emma, then Grace, then Logan, before resting again. Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked several times at the bright overhead lights before turning her head toward Emma. Her lips trembled, the faintest smile pulling at the corners. "She stayed all night?" "Yes," Logan said softly, stepping closer. "She didn't want to leave." Grace exhaled a soft, shaky breath. She looked so small against the pillow, her cheeks sunken, her skin almost translucent, the veins beneath faintly visible. She was wearing an oxygen tube, and even then, her breaths were shallow and uneven. Her honey-brown hair had been brushed by a nurse, but strands still clung to her forehead. She looked younger and older at the same time, like someone who had been asked to fight far beyond her strength. "Logan," she whispered. He leaned closer, lowering his tall frame so she didn't have to strain her voice. Her fingers reached for his hand. They felt cold, fragile, like the last warmth was slipping through them. I know I don't have long." The words struck Logan harder than he expected. He had been in war zones, had held men while they bled out, had heard last words whispered in sand-choked deserts. But this felt different. It wasn't a battlefield, yet it felt like a loss he wasn't prepared for. Not when the little girl sleeping beside him depended on the woman lying in this hospital bed. Grace looked at Emma again, her voice catching. "She's my whole world." "I know," Logan whispered. "I'm all she has," Grace continued. "And I'm leaving her." Her voice cracked on the word leaving, and for a moment she shut her eyes, as if the pain of that reality cut deeper than the disease ravaging her body. When she opened them again, there were tears on her lashes. "Logan, please don't let her be alone." His throat tightened. He had known this moment was coming. Anyone could read the bleak numbers on Grace's charts, but knowing didn't make it easier. He swallowed hard. "Grace, I'm not asking you to promise something you can't do," she whispered. "I know you're a Marine. I know your life isn't simple, but you're the kindest person she's ever met, and she trusts you." She paused, gathering a shaky breath. "You came for her when no one else did." She squeezed his hand gently. "Please. I just need to know that she won't end up with strangers. She's already lost so much." Logan's gaze drifted to Emma's sleeping form, the small rise and fall of her chest, the way Ranger had curled so carefully around her, guarding her even in sleep. Something within him tightened and softened at the same time. He had sworn to protect people. He had sworn to serve. But this wasn't a mission ordered by a commanding officer. This was something deeper, something that tugged at the edges of his chest. He didn't answer right away, and Grace saw the hesitation. Her voice wavered. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't ask. You barely know us. I'm so scared for her." Just then, Ranger lifted his head, rose to his feet, and walked silently to Logan's side. He nudged Logan's shoulder, firm, insistent, then rested his chin there, as if saying, "Some promises aren't made with words." Logan exhaled softly. Ranger had done this only once before. On the day Logan hesitated to take a new recruit into their squad overseas, a recruit who later saved Logan's life. The meaning wasn't lost on him. Slowly, Logan turned to Grace again. Her eyes were wet, pleading, full of a mother's last desperate hope. He reached out and took her frail hand gently with both of his. "Grace." His voice was steady, warm, filled with something unbreakable. "Listen to me. Emma will not be alone, not while I'm here. I'll make sure she's cared for. I'll make sure she's safe. I'll make sure she has a home." Grace's breath hitched. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and for the first time since he'd met her, she sobbed openly. Not from pain, not from fear, from relief. Emma stirred at the sound and opened her eyes. She blinked in confusion before seeing her mother crying. Immediately, she scrambled from the chair, rushing to the side of the bed. Mom, are you okay?" Grace wiped her tears, forcing a trembling smile. "I'm okay, baby. I'm just happy." Emma didn't understand, but she reached up and hugged her mother anyway. Grace held her tight, burying her face in Emma's hair, inhaling the scent as though she could memorize it. Logan placed a gentle hand on Emma's back. Grace extended her free hand toward his. "Thank you," she whispered. Ranger leaned forward, resting his head on Grace's arm. A small smile returned to her lips. "And thank you too," she said to him weakly. "You're a good boy." A soft whine escaped Ranger, a sound full of warmth, as if he understood. For a moment, the room felt still, peaceful, like the world had paused long enough for a mother to hold her child and trust that she was leaving her in good hands. As Logan stood by the bed, Grace's eyes fluttered closed for a moment, and her breathing slowed. A faint shiver ran through her body. Ranger stiffened instantly, ears pricking, tail lowering, his whole posture shifting from gentle comfort to sharp alertness. He stepped closer, placing one paw on the side of the mattress, then looked up at Logan with an expression that chilled him. Ranger had sensed this before. Moments where a life hung in balance. Grace opened her eyes again, but they were distant now, as if she were looking at something far beyond the room. "Logan," she whispered, voice thin as a dying ember. "When I'm gone, tell her I loved her more than anything. Tell her I fought to stay. Tell her she made my life worth every hard day." Logan felt something inside him break, slow and deep. Grace looked at Emma, brushing a final tear from her daughter's cheek. "Be brave, my sweet girl." Then she closed her eyes and fell back against the pillows, breath steady but weak, like a candle flickering in a draft. Ranger lowered his head and let out a long, mournful exhale. Logan realized with a jolt that he wasn't just witnessing a goodbye. He was accepting a responsibility that would change the rest of his life. Grace didn't pass then, not yet. But her energy was gone. She slept, her breathing shallow and fragile. A nurse came in to adjust the monitors and gently explained that Grace was stable for now. But her condition remained critical. Emma held her mother's hand until her eyelids began to droop again. Logan lifted her into his arms, and Ranger followed silently. Before they left the room, Logan turned back, memorizing Grace's small form beneath the blankets. He had made promises before in his life. Promises to brothers in combat. Promises to the fallen. But this promise was different. This one tied itself to his very soul. As they stepped into the hallway, Emma whispered into his shoulder, "You won't leave me, right?" Logan pressed a kiss to her hair. "Never." Ranger pressed against his leg, matching every step. And in that cold hospital corridor, with the morning light beginning to rise, a Marine, a child, and a loyal dog took their first steps into a future none of them had expected. But all of them would fight to protect. Logan had faced hostile terrain, insurgent traps, and nights so dark they swallowed the horizon whole. But nothing felt as daunting as the stack of paperwork sitting in front of him in the base administration office. The forms looked endless, a maze of legal terminology and checkboxes written in the most unforgiving bureaucratic English imaginable. Yet each signature carried only one thought behind it. Emma needs stability, and I'm the only person who can give it to her now. The Marine Corps required full transparency, background verification, chain of command approval, a written commitment that his service would not compromise a child's safety, a commander's character evaluation, financial statements, proof of housing, medical readiness forms, even an emergency family care plan. Staff Sergeant Logan Barrett had never filled out so many forms in his life, not even when he re-enlisted. His commanding officer, Captain Roland Pierce, was the kind of man built from square shoulders and stern expressions. In his early 40s, with a strong jaw lined by day-old stubble and eyes that saw both flaws and potential with unnerving precision, he carried an air of authority honed by 2 decades of service. But beneath all that discipline, Pierce was a man who believed in loyalty and responsibility. He scanned Logan's documents before signing. "You sure about this, Barrett? Kids aren't something you can return to supply if the fit isn't right." Logan stood straight. "Yes, sir, I'm sure." Pierce studied him a moment, then nodded. "Good. The Corps needs men who can fight on more than one battlefield." An hour later, Logan submitted the temporary guardianship petition. Sarah Donovan, assigned to Emma's case, reviewed his packet with professional composure and soft understanding in her hazel eyes. She wore her hair tied tighter today, the strain of late-night hospital work lingering in the faint shadows beneath them. "Everything looks clean," she said. "If the judge approves, Emma can stay with you without interruption." "How long?" Logan asked. "A few days," Sarah replied. "Maybe a week. Judges are slower around the holidays." "And Grace?" Sarah's voice softened. "Her condition is still critical. We'll know more soon." Logan thanked her, and she rested a hand briefly on his forearm. "Don't underestimate what you're doing, Logan. This isn't just paperwork. It's a lifeline." Outside the courthouse, snow fluttered in gentle spirals. Ranger sat obediently beside Emma, tail thumping lightly when he spotted his human. Emma wore the mint blue coat that hung loose on her small frame, a knit hat pulled low over her ears. She held a drawing in both hands. "It's you," she announced proudly as Logan approached. "But I added a cape." Logan laughed softly. "A cape, huh? Marines don't usually fly." "Well," Emma said with complete seriousness, "you're flying me home." And somehow that made sense. They returned to Logan's house, a small but sturdy two-bedroom home just a few minutes from the edge of base. Simple, functional, built like the man who lived in it. Until now, it had been quiet, orderly, and filled only with the faint hum of a fridge and the occasional clink of Logan's gear. Now, life seeped into every corner. A pair of tiny sneakers lay beside his combat boots. Ranger's toys were scattered near the couch, a pink blanket draped over the armchair. The fridge door was decorated with hastily taped drawings, all triangles and stick figures and crooked hearts that Emma insisted were art. Logan had never felt his house this alive. Emma followed him into the kitchen. Ranger padded behind her, ever the silent shadow. Logan cooked scrambled eggs with a level of focus usually reserved for assembling rifles. Emma sat on the counter swinging her legs, offering occasional commentary. "That egg looks sad. That one looks like a cloud. That one looks like it wants to escape." Logan chuckled. "Well, let's keep them all in the pan, okay?" Just as he plated breakfast, Ranger suddenly froze. Not the playful freeze, not the "I smell bacon" freeze. The instinctive, alert freeze. His ears pointed sharply toward Emma's room. His amber-brown eyes narrowed, focused. The hair along his spine lifted ever so slightly, not fear, but anticipation. A protector sensing something before a human could. Emma noticed first. "Ranger, what's wrong?" Ranger moved, silent and quick, padding toward her bedroom door. He sniffed once, then nudged it open with his nose, and stopped. Emma rushed behind him and gasped. On her pillow was a folded piece of paper she hadn't seen before. Not the kind of paper a child leaves accidentally. Clean edges, adult handwriting. Logan hurried over, heart thudding. Emma's voice trembled. "It's Mommy's." When Logan opened it, his breath caught. It wasn't a farewell letter. It was instructions, written long before Grace collapsed. A list of things she wanted Emma to have. A note about people who might try to claim guardianship wrongfully. And one sentence circled 3 times. "If anything happens, trust the one who finds her. He will come. Ranger will know." Ranger pressed his head to Logan's knee, eyes steady. Logan swallowed. It felt less like coincidence, and more like Grace had left a path only Ranger could follow. Days passed, each one a small battlefield of its own. Logan learned how to braid hair, badly. His thick Marine hands fumbled, and Emma giggled every time the braid fell apart before he tied it. Ranger watched, tilting his head in confusion, as if asking how a combat-trained Marine could lose a battle with a hair. Logan took her shopping for warm clothes. At the store, he insisted Emma choose what she liked. She chose purple gloves with tiny sparkles. Ranger sniffed them thoroughly, then approved with a quiet huff. They created a bedtime routine. Logan read Charlotte's Web in a voice deeper than Emma imagined Wilbur the pig would sound. She corrected him. Ranger curled at her feet every night, refusing to leave unless she was asleep. Sometimes, when Emma thought Logan wasn't looking, she stared at the empty second bedroom. "Is this for me?" Logan nodded. "Yeah, it's yours." Her voice wavered. "Even when Mommy gets better?" He knelt. Especially then, outside, the world prepared for Christmas. Inside, Logan learned that fatherhood wasn't a title. It was a series of choices, repeated every day, with a heart willing to stay. One night, as Emma brushed her teeth, Logan found Ranger sitting by the front door again. Same posture, same alert eyes as before. "Buddy," Logan said, kneeling. "You thinking of her?" Ranger pressed his head to Logan's chest. The weight of that simple gesture carried more understanding than words ever could. 1 week after the temporary guardianship was filed, Logan received a call. Dr. Hayes' voice was steady, but heavy. "Grace took a turn," he said. "You should come." Logan hung up, breath tight, heart pounding. Emma looked up from the kitchen table, a half-colored snowman in front of her. "Is it Mommy?" she whispered. He nodded. Emma stood slowly, pressing both hands into Ranger's fur for strength. "Can we go now?" Logan's voice was gentle. "Yes, we're going." Ranger walked ahead, tail low, ears forward, leading the way to the truck like a soldier guiding his unit through the snow. And as Logan locked the door behind them, he knew. The real battle was about to begin. The call came just as the sun was beginning to sink behind Ironwood's winter skyline. Snow tapped gently against the living room windows of Logan's house, where Emma sat on the floor coloring a picture of a Christmas tree. Ranger lay beside her, chin resting on his paws, eyes half closed in the warm glow of the fireplace. Logan had been sorting through adoption paperwork when his phone buzzed. He didn't think much of it until he saw the name on the screen. Ironwood General Hospital. Something cold spiraled down his spine. Ranger lifted his head at the same moment, ears pricking, as if he sensed the shift before Logan said a word. "Barrett speaking," Logan answered. Dr. Hayes' voice came through, calm but carrying the unmistakable weight of bad news. "Sergeant, Grace is asking for you and Emma. She's awake, but you should come. Soon." Logan didn't need further explanation. There are tones only soldiers and doctors use, tones that mean this is the last chance. He shut the folder, slipped his coat on, and approached Emma gently. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "your mom wants to see us." Emma's eyes widened. She rose quickly, glancing to Ranger first, as if asking him silently whether she could be brave enough. Ranger nudged her hand, tail low but steady. She nodded. "Okay, I'm ready." They left the house together, man, child, and dog, stepping into the waiting night. The drive was quiet. Snow fell in soft curtains across the windshield, blurring the world into a hazy glow. Ironwood's Christmas lights blinked faintly through the storm, reds, greens, yellows. Colors meant to warm the season. But tonight they only emphasized the cold knot forming in Logan's chest. Emma sat pressed against a Ranger in the back seat, her gloved fingers tangled in his fur. The purple gloves she loved looked too small for the weight she carried. Ranger didn't move, didn't blink. He stared straight ahead, alert and solemn. Logan had seen Ranger like this only twice in his life. Right before dangerous firefights. Right before loss. The dog wasn't worried about the snow. He was worried about what waited on the other side of it. Nurse Angela met them by the elevator. Her snowman scrubs were wrinkled, her hair pulled into a loose bun, but her eyes held the gentle gravity of someone who understood that grief needs quiet. "She's awake," Angela whispered, "and she's waiting." Emma swallowed. "Is she hurting?" "She's comfortable, sweetheart," the nurse said softly, "and she'll be so happy to see you." They walked down the dim hallway, Ranger's nails clicking against the tile. Halfway there, he slowed, then stopped completely. His ears rose, then eased back. He wasn't afraid. He was listening. Logan felt the hair on his arms lift. "Buddy," he whispered, "stay close." Ranger obeyed, pacing forward one careful step at a time. Grace looked impossibly small against the hospital bed when they entered. Her honey-brown hair clung softly to her temple. Her face was pale, almost luminescent under the soft monitor glow. The oxygen tube beside her rose and fell with long, shaky breaths. But when she saw Emma, her brown eyes lit like the first flame of a candle. "Baby," she breathed, voice fragile but warm. "Come here." Emma hurried to the bedside, climbing into the chair. She took her mother's cool hand with both of her own, tears forming instantly. "I'm here, Mommy," she whispered. Grace smoothed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You look so pretty in your new gloves." Emma sniffed. "Ranger picked them." Grace smiled, small, tired, but genuine. "Then they're perfect." Ranger moved forward until his head rested gently on the mattress. Grace placed her trembling hand on his fur. "And you," she whispered. "You kept her safe." Ranger closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Logan stood near the foot of the bed, feeling something in his chest tighten and twist. Grace turned her gaze to him. "Thank you," she murmured, "for bringing her." "You asked," Logan said softly. "I was coming no matter what." Grace nodded weakly. "You always came when it mattered." Rehook 2-3 into the chapter. Suddenly, Ranger lifted his head. He stood, not abruptly, but slowly, deliberately, his ears tilting toward the corner of the room. His eyes locked onto a spot in the air just above Grace's shoulder. He stared, not at her. Above her? Logan froze. He'd seen Ranger do this once, exactly once, on a desert night before a fellow Marine slipped away. Emma noticed. "Ranger," she whispered, frightened. "What is it?" Ranger stepped sideways and pressed himself against Emma's legs, steadying her. Grace exhaled softly, as if understanding something the others could not see. Her hand cupped Emma's cheek. "I don't have much time," she whispered. Grace's words were slow now, each syllable like a fragile thread holding her to this side of the world. "Emma, my sweet girl, you have given me joy I never thought I'd have. Every laugh, every hug, every morning we made it through together." Emma clung to her hand. "I want you to stay." "I want that too," Grace breathed. "More than anything." Her voice cracked. "But sometimes, loving someone means trusting that someone else will carry them forward." She turned to Logan, tears shining on her lashes. "You came when she needed someone. You stayed when you didn't have to. You saved her." Logan swallowed hard. "Grace, promise me," she whispered. "Promise you'll never let her feel alone in this world." Logan took her fading hand gently. "I promise," he said. His voice didn't shake. It didn't waver. It carried the same weight as every vow he'd ever made on the battlefield. "She'll have a home. She'll have family. She'll have us." Grace closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming. Exactly when you did." Her breathing softened, slowed. Emma laid her head gently on her mother's chest. "I love you, Mommy," she cried. Grace gathered her final strength, lifted her hand once more, and touched her daughter's hair. "I love you," she exhaled. And then, as peacefully as a candle flickering out, Grace slipped away. Ranger lowered his head onto the bed and released a soft, mournful sound. Not a bark, not a whine, a goodbye. Time blurred after that. The funeral was small, simple, full of quiet tears and folded hands. Emma placed a peppermint candy, her courage gift, on the casket before it was lowered. Months passed, filled with forms, interviews, home inspections, and a judge with kind eyes who listened carefully to every word. And then, one morning in spring, approved. Emma Clark became Emma Clark Barrett. She sat taller in the courtroom chair, wearing her mint coat and purple gloves, Ranger's tail thumping against the wood floor beside her. When the judge announced her new name, Emma reached for Logan's hand and whispered, "Daddy." The word struck him like a warm bloom in the chest. Quiet, unexpected, powerful. The next Christmas, Ironwood Square shone brighter than any year before. A towering tree glittered with golden lights. Snow blanketed the ground like soft cotton. Emma held Logan's hand, her cheeks rosy in the cold. Ranger sat proudly beside them, a red ribbon tied to his harness. "Last year," Emma said softly, "I thought Christmas was the saddest day ever." Logan looked down at her gently. "And now?" Emma squeezed his hand. "Now I think it was the day you and Ranger found me." Logan smiled, eyes warm. "No," he said quietly. "It was the day we found each other." Emma wrapped her arms around Ranger's neck. The dog leaned into her, tail sweeping slow arcs of contentment. And beneath the glow of Ironwood's Christmas lights, a Marine who had spent years fighting battles far from home, a little girl who once believed she had no one, and a loyal German shepherd who seemed born to guide them, stood together as a family formed not by blood, but by love strong enough to guide them out of the darkest winter. In the quiet glow of Ironwood's Christmas lights, we are reminded that the greatest miracles do not always arrive with thunder or fanfare. Sometimes they come softly, through a child's courage, a mother's final prayer, a soldier's open heart, or the steady loyalty of a loyal dog. And sometimes, God's grace shows itself not in what we receive, but in the people He sends to walk beside us when the nights grow cold. This story is a reminder that even in our ordinary days, miracles weave themselves quietly into the spaces between fear and hope. Love finds us when we least expect it. Help arrives when we dare to reach out. And the smallest act of kindness can become the light that leads someone out of their darkest winter. As you finish this story, may you carry with you the truth that no one is ever truly alone. There is always a hand reaching out, a heart ready to listen, and a promise from above that even the deepest sorrow can become the beginning of something new. If this story touched your heart, please share it so it may reach someone who needs a reminder of hope. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, courage, and the quiet miracles that shape our lives. May God bless you and your loved ones, protect your home, and guide you through every season ahead.